his allotted time. Alex directs the environmental programs at the Kotzebue IRA, and he's going to discuss approaches that address local research priorities using a tribally centered approach. So, Alex, over to you.
All right, I just need to upload. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
All right, so I have sort of an overview of what the tribe has tried to accomplish since 1997 when I started here, and there will be a lot of slides with a lot of information, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on sort of any of them. So I guess it's about looking fast. But anyways, we'll see how it goes. I just want people to at the end to sort of have a understanding of the comprehensive sort of holistic approach that is sort of cultural and ecological in nature, I guess.
And Alex,
the tribes.
Let me just jump in and say that the slides are already available on the IOPIC website, so that if people want to go back over the information, because you're going to run through it very quickly, they're already there. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, and then people can follow up with me through email or whatnot. So, all right. Anyways, my name's Alex Whiting. I'm the environmental specialist for the Native Village of Kotzebue. I started in 1997, and I've been doing that ever since. This picture here is Kotzebue Sound, Northwest Alaska. Not a whole lot of research when I started was directed towards Kotzebue Sound. A lot of it had been done sort of out of Barrow or further south in the Bering Sea out of Nome. And there was a need to increase and get the ball rolling on doing some ecological research here, and that's sort of the mantle that I took up at that time. The people that are members of the Native Village of Kotzebue are the Kikitaru. They've been here for generations, and the hatched area is sort of the general tribal affiliation geographic area from work that Tiger Birch did earlier in the century. And the blue area is in some ways our main focused area for ecological research, even though, of course, we've expanded beyond that, but that's sort of the core area. And that also sort of fits nicely with what the traditional Kikitaru territory is. This is just a quick snap of the program. My main funding comes from the EPA, the Indian General Assistance Program, which we started in 1997. And this just gives a quick sort of overview of what we sort of have done with that program, which I guess the main point from this slide is that when we started, we surveyed our membership about what their priorities were, and Kotzebue Sound Health and the resources in Kotzebue Sound were sort of the main theme to the responses that we got back from the members. So that was sort of our marching papers to focus on that area. And then in addition, when we did a harvest survey research of our membership, we've seen that 70% by weight of all the food that they harvest in the area comes out of Kotzebue Sound. So one of the things that we've been talking about with the LTER and even today is about how tribes interact with researchers. And when I started here, one of the complaints that I heard was that researchers come into an area, nobody sort of knows who they are or what they're up to, and then they leave and nobody knows what they accomplished or anything like that. So what I did was looked at this principles for research in the Arctic, which I think was talked about earlier, and we adapted that to the Kikitagra meat situation. And I drafted a tribal ordinance that would require all researchers that interact with the tribe on research to submit a research protocol questionnaire, and then the administration can review that along with the council, and we can clarify issues and work with the researchers to make sure that we feel like the research is worthwhile, and to address any concerns that we may have. And sometimes in the past we've just decided that this research wasn't for us, and while we can't sort of stop anyone from doing research, it at least makes it a lot more difficult them to be successful if they don't sort of have tribal buy-in and support on that. And these are sort of the who, what, when, where, and why questions that are part of that protocol that was the questionnaire that was developed as part of that protocol and ordinance. And so I imagine that this is probably of interest to you, many people on this here. And it's been, really quite successful. And it's also an opportunity in many cases for the tribe to actually become partners or, be PIs on the project and shape the project to answer questions and tribal priorities. In addition to, what the researchers ultimately set out, what their questions and priorities were, but to also incorporate the tribal sort of priorities. So it's a very effective tool and way for researchers to interact with the tribal communities. One of the first things I did in 1999, climate change as a sort of general public topic was still, not very well known or discussed. This is 1999, at least in these parts of the world. And but I seen that was on the radar. And one thing I wanted to do was to interview elders in the community that had their main experience, between sort of 1930 and 2000. And talk about the changes that they had noticed on a variety of issues, just to have that for context going forward. These are just some of the excerpts. You guys could read them at your own. So what came out of that early effort was the invitation to participate in the 2005 Arctic Climate Impact Assessment that went to Congress. And the results of the project that I did was a case study in the Indigenous Perspectives chapter of that. So we're proud to be a part of that and to be a part of the dialogue, the national dialogue on climate change and Indigenous perspectives. Another thing I did besides talking to the elders was I noticed that on a lot of the management issues, a lot of our most active users of federal lands, northwestern Alaska has about 60 to 70% federal lands, mostly Park Service land. And Anilka, which most of you may know, was passed, but when it was passed, the people that were the most active users were not really part of that discussion. They were kind of too young to be part of that. And so it was interesting to the tribe and to myself to understand how, their perspective on how they seen Anilka and what it did to the management scheme and the cultural sort of affiliations with those lands. And so that was another way to just get some context about how people actually, saw themselves in relationship to federal management of the region. This is the harvest survey program I talked about. I developed and led this project, and we did 3 years with just our tribal members. And you can see here that marine mammals and fish make up about 70% of the resources taken in the region. And Kotzebue Sound, I guess probably be helpful to note, the major resources in Kotzebue Sound are sheefish. They use it for overwintering. Salmon, they come to for spawning, especially chum salmon. We have like 5 species of whitefish that use the sound in the lagoons. Saffron cod, herring, and smelt. And the herring and smelt and saffron cod are sort of year-round residents. We have our own populations of those. And they're sort of the basis for a lot of the ecology in the whitefish in Kotzebue Sound. Belugas use Kotzebue Sound for calving, feeding, and molting. Bearded seals use Kotzebue Sound for feeding on their northern migration. And for some pupping, and the pups, the young bearded seals, young of the year bearded seals, and 1-year-old bearded seals use Kotzebue Sound as a nursery and feeding ground for the first few months of their life. Ring seals use Kotzebue Sound for their fall feeding, for overwintering, for breeding, molting, and pupping. And spotted seals use Kotzebue Sound for their fall feeding on their southern migration. Another thing I started in 2002 was a weekly journal. Try to document things like weather and the resources, what's happening with the fish and animals, and what people are up to and how the traveling is, how the ice is, break up, freeze up, all those kind of things. And that's a really nice record to have for a lot of reasons, but I find it very helpful when we're planning research projects, when we try to target times of the year when certain resources are in places where it would be good for the research to be carried out, like if we're doing capture projects. So that's sort of something I do for a lot of reasons, but it's a very valuable research tool because you don't have to try to remember or try to guess or, interview people. You can just go back and look at the last 15 years, when are spotted seals abundant, et cetera. So I'm glad I started that. One of the first things we did related to the surveys that we got back from people was to look at contaminants and nutrients in ice seals. That was something that people were interested in. And I've been doing that basically since the late 1990s there with, you can see these collaborators here, especially Todd O'Hara out of the WTL or the VetMed now out of UAF. He's been one of my longtime collaborators. And then Paul Becker at NIST and Jeff York were collaborators early on in that archiving. And Lori Quackenbush too has done a lot of archiving of our samples. So. There's Todd O'Hara and Sarah Moses. And I guess one of the other points I should make related to the topic of my presentation is, so the interest of the tribe was to understand nutrients and contaminants. And in order to accomplish that, we have these collaborations where we bring in graduate students from UAF that are working in that field. And not only do we have them do the research, but we also introduce them to working with tribes and to understanding sort of the tribal perspectives and the tribal communities. And so once they graduate and go on into the veterinary field, a lot of them have worked in the contaminants and nutrients field with wildlife resources that are eaten by tribal peoples. They also have that experience and perspective to go forward. So it's like a win-win for everyone on that one there. But that wasn't something we sort of set out to do, but that's just a really good benefit of that approach. And then this is just an example. One of the things I've always been a proponent of through all these efforts that we've done is to make science user-friendly and not scary to the general public. And so this is one example of taking what people are used to seeing in the stores there with the food labels and presenting scientific results in a format that people are sort of used to and can understand. Our early project that we did was with Eastern Carolina University. They were interested in looking at the ecology of Kotzebue Sound, and of course, we needed to get baseline information about Kotzebue Sound. So we developed a tech-sec component and a qualitative sort of ecological component, you know, who's home, in addition to using the opportunity to gather clams and start looking at climate effects on growth related to the different ice coverage patterns and stuff. So that was a successful project there. And here's sort of a snapshot of the principles. And you can also see here, you'll notice with all these projects on the local participants, you know, there's a big number of local participants, and all the projects we do, we try to have a lot of both, you know, the Western science people, but also the local participants. I mean, they're the reason that all these projects are successful. My job is sort of just to facilitate that relationship. That's sort of how I see my role. There was the publication that came out of that. One of the other things that came out of that was I illustrated this poster, again, to provide feedback to the community in a user-friendly format. Not many people here are gonna, you know, read a book, even if it has nice pictures and illustrations, but a poster is something that everyone can take a few minutes and look at. In addition, I wanted to have something that was available to bring over to the coastal camps and hang up in their camps and let kids go out and go beachcombing and start to think about species and science and in that perspective. So that was just a product that came out of that, and that's been very successful in sort of what I had hoped and intended it for. But that's another case of trying to develop user-friendly in the sense of local people and sort of how they go about taking in information from research projects. And then this is a snapshot of the tech sec part of it, using the indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge, and understanding how people see the sound in relation to the resources. Early in 2003, I partnered with Kathy Frost, who some of you may know, and we started thinking about how to satellite tag bearded seals in particular and learn more about their movements and behavior. And we wanted to find a approach that would allow local people to be active participants. And so we used the skills and knowledge that local people had of using nets, a traditional method of netting seals, and we just designed the net so the seals would stay alive. And over time, we even had local people, including myself, that had permits from the federal government to capture and take seals without even any scientists being present. And that we did seal tagging from 2004 until 2015 with various partners. And that was a very successful project and a groundbreaking project. We were the first ones to successfully capture bearded seals and fit them with satellite tags. So I'll just rip through these pictures. You can see that's just all local people there taking the morphometrics and the other samples and tagging the seals. And these are some of the examples of the information that we were finding out. Some of the lengths that the tags would stay on, behavior information that came out of that too. It wasn't just about where they went, but we were able to get a lot of this other kind of information. And we continue that with ring seals, sort of the same kind of situation there. The interesting thing about this one is if those ring seals are only tagged for an average of 4 or 5 months and they're traveling 6,000 miles, you can imagine over the course of the year, they're traveling like 10 to 15,000 miles. And that's pretty amazing. The takeaway from the ring seal project is we were able to sort of illustrate the separation of young bearded seals and their habitat at the ice edge from the adult ring seals. Where they stayed back in their breeding grounds. And then we worked with NIML to attempt to capture adult and subadult bearded seals, which is extremely challenging. The water's crystal clear, the sun is out 24 hours, and they're very big animals, but we successfully captured 7 of them. the first ones to do that. And the big takeaway from that was the winter fidelity feeding grounds of these bearded seals. I mean, sort of no one had imagined that they go to the same place every year during the winter time. And then we partnered with ADF&G on their hunter-assisted seal tagging project, which continues to this day in various communities. But that's all sort of, in some ways, came out of the work that we did here in Kotzebue Sound. There's sort of a summary of all the seals that we ended up tagging. One of the things I wanted to do, there was a lot of satellite tagging of various marine mammals, and this is during the 193 years, and I wanted to use some of that information in order when we give public presentations about our concern of resources vis-a-vis development. And so we got everyone together except the USGS Walrus people who sort of never wanted to play with us on this deal here and come up with just general illustrations to sort of prove our point about the widespread use of this area for these marine resources. And the same thing when the Coast Guard was doing their PAR study through the Bering Strait, when we comment on their NEPA documents, it just gave us a way to make our point sort of in illustrative form. And so that was all very helpful. And the same thing when we're thinking about development, we use some of that information. And then I guess the important point too is that not only did our local people get trained to work on those projects, but when NOAA wanted to have indigenous participants in their Bering Sea studies on seals, the first couple of years, Kotzebue Sound people that had worked on our projects were the ones that were on the Oscar Dyson and the Healy doing that kind of research and tagging ribbon seals and looking at seal density. So that was a way that they could springboard off of our projects and, go on to other stuff even on their own beyond Kotzebue Sound. And then this is just some more physical work that we did, physiological work that we've done with seals, looking at fats and whiskers and diets and other kind of things. One of the things that continues right now is we have bearded seal in Santa Cruz. We had a couple down there, but one unfortunately got killed in an accident down there. But we have one down there now working with Coraline Reichmuth and Brandon Southall on hearing stuff. The only captive bearded seal in North America, I believe, right now, and that one come out of our Kotzebue Sound to work on that. We worked with Brendan Kelly on ring seal population structure and climate change. I guess the neat thing about this one is the way that we were catching seals using these hoop nets here and a battery and a transmitter, where you hold the battery or you hold the net across the hole with monofilament with a copper lead. And then once the seal pops up, you spring the trap. And the interesting thing about this is once the seal hops in the hole to go down and he's splashing water, it short circuits their brain. And I don't know how long they would sit there splashing water on their face, but I imagine it would be a very long time. And so that was very interesting to see the response of the seals. They're unable to process what's going on and why they can't dive through their hole. And so it's a real easy way to catch seals. And we also help train dogs for finding seals while we're mapping out den habitat. And we're continuing to work on genetic analysis of Kotzebue Sound belugas by getting samples of belugas that are harvested. And we also pilot project some acoustic recording stuff here in Kotzebue Sound to try to figure out what whales are doing here. You can see this example from July 3. One of the things that we found was that you could see killer whales that are present off Kotzebue Sound for almost 30 days in a row. And nobody, not local people, not scientists, had imagined that killer whales were that ubiquitous out there. So which in trying to understand what's happening with belugas is very useful information that we otherwise wouldn't know. And the same with sheepfish. We've done some work with putting recorders into sheepfish so we could understand. We have two populations, the Selwick River population and Kobuk River population, and they sort of co-locate during the wintertime. And for management purposes, we're trying to understand how they interact during the wintertime. You could see that we managed to come up with useful information about where they go at what times of years. we're working with the Wildlife Conservation Society on whitefish and lagoon ecology projects right now. We continue to do that. Whitefish is an important resource for people. We've contracted out when Shell wanted to use Kotzebue Sound as a staging area for their Chukchi Sea work. We were wondering about the acoustic impact of the sound, so we contracted out to get that kind of information. We work with Seth Danielson out of UAF to understand currents, if there's spills or other kinds of things that are related to currents in Kotzebue Sound. We wanted to develop an understanding of how currents work. Near shore fishes, we work with ABR to do studies about the near shore fish ecology and what's there. We have a project starting right now funded by the Moore Foundation, working with UAF and Columbia University for the next 4 years to understand better ice. We're going to use, we've got a couple of 12-foot drones that we're going to deploy with 12-pound packages on them to do various kinds of instrumentation of the ice and start to learn more about that, combining local people again with Western science on that project. Cyanobacteria, you guys know, is a up and coming sort of deal in the Arctic, and we did some of the first work on that starting in 2009, trying to understand the species and the toxins present. And we continue to be interested in cyanobacteria because that's going to be more of an issue. And all these kind of things, we make sure we put out posters and journal articles, newsletters, and presentations so we can provide the information back to the community and to others that are interested. And going forward, work still needs to be done on ice seals and hydrocarbons. There's not enough known about the physiological responses to that in case there's spills or other kind of things in the Chukchi and Bering Seas. There was the 2011 UME unusual mortality event with ice seals, and we got a lot of specimens for that, and we worked a lot trying to figure out what was happening. And we still don't know what was happening, but we're still interested in trying to, move forward with that kind of research. There's still work that needs to be done on genetics of ring seals, the population structure and size we're still interested in. And we're extremely interested also in the denning habitat of ring seals, which is going to continue to be impacted by climate change. And that's it, I guess. Might have been longer than 25 minutes, I don't know.
Well, maybe a few minutes more, but that was really great. Any quick questions for Alex? And take yourself off mute if you're asking a question.
All right, good.
So I'll have one at least, and that's, you've obviously gone through a lot of information, and the PowerPoint is there on the website, on the IOPIC website. Are you able to run a website that has even just half of the data that you've shown? Are you able to do that, or is that is the data basically coming out in the publications?
Kotzebuera.org, there's a few pages on some of the projects, but not all of them. So there's more data on our website, kotzebuera.org, under environmental projects. Okay. Especially on the seal projects, but there's some more information there.
And Becky had another question, but she's had to leave the call, so you may want to jump onto the chat before it disappears. Any other questions for Alex? Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you to both speakers, and to everybody for participating. The next meeting is the day after July 4th. So see you here hopefully next month on July the 5th.